stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker of Elkins Consulting. When we share stories, whether in our personal or business lives, how we share them makes a difference in how we remember them and in how we're perceived by the people we're sharing them with. Think about a story a stranger recently told you. What did that story say about the person sharing it? Did it demonstrate a different aspect of their character than you were expecting? How we choose to share a story, the details about the characters, our body language, our facial expression, and our tone of voice all contribute to the perception our audience will have of us afterward. When listening to this podcast, I encourage you to listen to consider your related stories, to consider which stories in your life might have impacted you in similar ways, and to consider how you share your own stories and the messages they carry for yourself and for the people around you. For the next few weeks, we'll be exploring the word resilience. According to dictionary.com, resilience is defined as the power or ability to return to the original form, position, etc., after being bent, compressed, or stretched. Elasticity. And ability to recover readily from illness, depression, adversity, or the like. Buoyancy. Our first episode in this series explores that definition from the perspective of a cancer survivor, Andy Amundsen. Though I'd never use that phrase, cancer survivor, to describe or define this woman, it does give you a good picture of the specific illness and adversity she has experienced to help her define resilience for herself. If you're ready to improve your relationships and your team's effectiveness and productivity through communication coaching, visit elkinsconsulting.com to learn how we can help through a variety of workshop and keynote topics and StrengthsFinders workshops and coaching programs. Well, for my treat today, I randomly reached out to my friend Andy Amundsen, and I said, "Do you have time for a quick visit?" So here I am sitting on her living room couch to talk about resilience. And Andy and I met nearly 10 years ago, shortly after she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and she was given 6 months to live. So if anyone can talk about resilience, it's my friend Andy. So I'm feeling pretty grateful that you are taking the time to visit with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Andy, I always ask my guests to share something about themselves that most people don't know. And the reason I ask that particular question is that we're going to get into some pretty personal stories over the next 45 minutes or so. And I like for the listeners to have a different perspective on you, to know you a little bit differently than they would otherwise. It'll give them some context for the rest of the stories.
Okay.
So what do you think? What about you is something that most people might not know?
I'm a geek.
A geek?
I am.
In what way?
Very much into Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Star Trek.
I did not know that.
Yes.
And that's funny. I mean, nearly 10 years we've been friends, and I don't think I've actually been in your house before, which is kind of weird, but I'm looking at this huge collection of movies stacked up.
Not even all of them.
So tell me, was this something that you did from when you were little? When did this kind of start, this fantasy world of fascination with Harry Potter and things magical like that?
Probably started when I was little. I think I always wanted to be a mystical creature, a mermaid, a witch, vampire. Those were, everybody else was like, I want to be a rock star. I want to be, I want to have a tail.
So your Halloween costumes must have been interesting.
No, I hate Halloween.
Oh, see, now that's something, when I asked you if there was something most people don't know about you.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a Halloween thing.
No.
So what do you think is kind of the draw for that?
Probably getting out of reality. My life kind of sucked from the beginning, so...
In terms of just family life and not a happy childhood.
No, not a happy childhood. Emotional, physical, mental abuse.
All right.
So, yeah.
So that will definitely lead somebody to looking at Marvel Comics and wishing they had superpowers.
Wishing they were Storm from X-Men. Yeah.
Was that your first? Was that like kind of the first big one?
No. I couldn't even tell you what the first big one was. But, I mean, Storm's probably the first one that I remember that I wanted to be like, I want to control the weather.
Awesome. And she's a woman, so you could relate to her.
Yes.
I have to tell you that back when I was must have been 4th or 5th grade, when Linda Carter was Wonder Woman, I would beeline home so that I could catch Wonder Woman on TV. And what I loved about her was that she was kind, but she was also straight up, and she told you exactly what she needed to say. And there was something about her that was feminine without being soft.
Yes, very strong, but very powerful, and yet giving and kind. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we have that in common, I guess.
We do have that in common.
And it kind of leads right into the idea behind this topic of resilience that I wanted to explore with you, because clearly when you have models like that are not necessarily real life, but that you feel connected to in some way, maybe that's part of what has contributed to your resilience, your fortitude in fighting what you've been fighting and surviving what you've been surviving.
Possibly. I guess I've never thought of it. I guess I feel that obviously I'm still here to do something that I didn't think of at the time, but I don't know. I mean, I was the surrogate mother for my sisters. Mm-hmm. I was the adult in the family for a while. There's so much that I had to fight for that I'm just not a quitter. Ever.
That is a really good description of you. I'm not a quitter. That is definitely how I would describe it. She's not a quitter. So when you think back on these models, the characters in these shows, is there one story in particular or one time that you went to see a movie or you read a comic or you read a book that you can kind of relate to now, that you look back now and you're like, oh yeah, that was big for me?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there really is one. The sad thing is you have to remember I have chemo brain, so I'm like, my memories are shot.
Well, let's see if I can trigger one for you.
Okay.
When the first Star Wars came out, I was living in Colorado, and we went to this huge theater. It was a very famous, huge theater, the Continental, just to the south end of Denver. And the line was all the way around the building. And we waited. And I was just a little girl. I mean, this was the 70s, right? So I was under 10. And I remember coming out of that with Princess Leia as my hero. And partly because she was just like, not just strong, but she was in your face strong.
Right.
And we had never really seen a character like that before, not quite like that.
Right.
And she was just not going to take no for an answer. I was a little disappointed that she was looking for somebody to rescue her, because I figured she could probably do it herself. But at the same time,
I don't think she realized she could do it herself.
She didn't. It's kind of like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Absolutely.
She just didn't know she had it in her.
Yeah.
But to this day, when I look back at that experience of seeing her on the big screen, beautiful and strong, but not traditionally beautiful.
Right.
This was not Sophia Loren. It was not Farrah Fawcett. This was a woman that was not traditionally beautiful, and yet.
And fully covered, mind you.
Fully covered. She wasn't wearing a bra. I heard this whole story about how, the director made sure that she wasn't wearing a bra. But I didn't notice that.
No, I didn't
as a little
either.
girl.
I don't even know that I would notice it now.
No, because what we were looking at was this character that we could really relate to.
Right.
So
Who stood up for herself, and with Princess in front of everybody, you're a princess. And she's like, yes, but
I'm waiting.
Also my own person, and I'm going to take care of the people that I love.
So she defined herself for us.
Very much.
By her actions. She never had to say that.
No, never had to. No, she was, that's a good, probably a good idea of
Do you remember that movie?
I do remember that movie when I first saw it, and I loved it. Yeah.
So where were you?
Boy, I'm trying to think. It may have been at home, but I want to say I saw it in the movie theater, but I know that's not right. I know the first movie I remember seeing in a movie theater is E.T., and that was years after.
Oh, I loved E.T. I loved E.T.
So,
but you saw it at home, probably. At home,
yeah.
Do you remember who was with you? Do you have any recollection?
I don't remember. My sisters were never into that. So my mom was never into that, so it was probably one of those random things that
it came on and you just watched
it. Yeah.
But clearly you remember how it made you feel.
Absolutely.
Which was?
Like I wanted to be strong like she was, and I wanted to know my worth. I think is probably a big part of how that movie made me feel. Yeah. Because she knew what she was worth, and she knew what she could do.
She knew she was smart and strong, and it wasn't because she had a label called princess.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think she was raised to believe that, and some of us just have to teach that to ourselves.
Which is a big part of what makes you so resilient. So I think of people who have been through a lot, and not all of them, just because they survived, I don't necessarily think of them as resilient. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and it's not any affect. It's not something that they're doing or not doing. It's that their demeanor, really more than anything, that makes me think of resilience. So when I think of you and resilience, I tried to figure out, as I was driving over here to talk to you, I was trying to figure out what it was about you that made me think of that word and where it might come from. And the only thing I told you before, the word that popped into my head along with resilience was fortitude.
Right.
That internal strength, like you have tree roots growing out of your feet. Like I think of you as this magnificent tree that is just standing tall. And then you just said something about the fact that you think you're still here because there's a purpose, that you're here for a reason.
Right.
So I wonder if that's part of what makes you come across as so resilient, not just to me, but I'm sure many, many others who know you. So what do you think? I mean, is there something in particular?
I don't know. I remember when the doctor told me that I had stage 4 breast cancer and gave me 6 months. And he said, I can give you pain medication. We can make this pain-free. Or we can try chemo. And I said, we've got to try chemo. I'm a single mother. I've got 2 kids to raise and I have grandkids to meet. And now, of course, both my kids are adults. And I have 2 grandbabies that I absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
And I am just not ready to stop yet. I meet people regularly at work who are going through cancer, and it's random. You'll have somebody come in and be like, so I need to find a bra, I'm going in and having a mastectomy and I need this, and I'll be like, well, that's really strange that I ended up talking to you today because, and hence our conversations will start, and I will give them some information that I know, send them places and talk to people that I have talked to, like the Survivor Boutique. But yeah, there's just a lot of people that have come across my life that I never would have met.
Mm-hmm.
Like you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you become a resource for people who are struggling, and whether it's breast cancer or some other form of cancer, or even just life. Struggle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get called mom at work by everybody. So if that tells you anything.
I'm not surprised.
Right. Yeah. Everybody calls me mom. And if they have problems, they come to me. My phone goes wild with text messages and messenger messages. And, yeah.
So I could tell that you had a specific situation, a specific person in your head as you were telling me about a woman coming through and saying, I need a bra. And the first thing that popped into my head is only someone who creates an environment of comfort would draw that out of a total stranger in a random conversation. I mean, clearly you exude and that kind of compassion that people will share things with you that they wouldn't necessarily share with a stranger. So I'm guessing that it just seemed like you had something in your head, a specific situation. Can you tell me what happened? Like how she came through the line and give me a little more specifics so I can build a picture around it?
Well, I work in apparel, and she came through and was just happened to be talking to me and said, how tired she was. And he said, I'm so sorry. And she said she was just told that she had breast cancer. And we started talking, and I shared my story with her, and she said, well, I'm actually looking for clothing, a bra that'll work for after mastectomies. And, we just kind of talked and found out that she had hormone-fed, cancer, which is what mine is. Mm-hmm. And nobody told her the things that she can and can't do. And that I was like, what? I'm like, yeah, you have to watch your soy intake because it all mimics estrogen in your body. And you have to, you got to talk, you can't take hormone replacements. And she's like, what? Nobody's ever said this to me. So I just feel like I just happened to be there and the person that she needed to talk to.
Exactly. So she picks out a few bras.
She did pick out a few bras. Now, I can't tell you if she's come back. I do have customers that come in and strictly look for me now that are just for hugs, just to see how I'm feeling, just to... Mm-hmm. But, she did pick out a few that would be soft for her.
Right, because it's tender.
Yeah. Tender is an understatement.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine, but I can kind of think about it.
Right.
On some level. So I'm imagining this conversation going on with this woman, and I can imagine some tears flowing, even when you're trying to be strong for the person.
Right.
But I can also imagine as she's leaving a hug. Did you hug her?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just for our listeners, when Andy hugs you, you feel it to the middle of your soul. This is not a side hug kind of woman. When she hugs, it's for real. And I think that's part of why we connected so deeply was that first time we met, we hugged like that.
Absolutely.
It was like a forever hug.
Yes. I've been told I give great hugs.
You do. You do. Wow. So I keep coming back to this idea that you serve a purpose and that that's part of what drives you in terms of your resilience. And I would love for our listeners to really think about that in terms of resilience isn't necessarily something you get externally through practice, through having struggle,
right? But
that when you're trying to build that resilience, what did we say at the beginning? It's not if something's going to happen.
It's when.
It's when.
Right.
So understanding what your value is and your strength and having that fortitude of purpose.
Yeah.
It's a fortitude when it comes to purpose, even if you don't know necessarily what that purpose is.
And I think a lot of my purpose is something so horrible happened when I was young. I mean, I was 36 when I was diagnosed. But because of that, I'm not hardened. I have probably more compassion than I did prior to that.
Have you seen people go the other way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people that I met in chemo that we were friends, and just the toxic things that would come out of her mouth, I just can't talk to her.
She's angry.
Very angry. And she's still here. And I'm like, why would you be upset? I mean, you can be upset that you got diagnosed. You can be upset that your doctor's bills are stupid, but,
you're still here.
You're still here. That's things you can do something about the other, but
right.
Or not, which is kind of how I choose to look at it.
A whole other thing. I know. Well, and I think that's so important that people start talking about that specifically, that
right.
people go one way or the other. They either get more compassionate with struggle and understand the perspective of others and be more grateful,
right.
or they just get angry and bitter because this happened to them instead of thinking in terms of the obstacle being part of your journey.
Right. Yeah. Instead of thinking it happened to you, think maybe it happened for you.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely slowed me down. I worked too much. Mm-hmm. I played too much. There was just a lot of too much in excess. Just, I don't know, it slowed me down and made me realize what was important.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the way it affects you is you can either give up or you can fight, and I choose to fight.
Mm-hmm. But not in an angry way.
Absolutely not.
So do you think that, so here we are talking about you and your fortitude, your perspective, your compassion. Have you seen this show up in your two daughters or in the other people that surround you? Have you seen a change in them in terms of that, their own recognition of their own fortitude, or how do you think that's impacted your community, your close community?
Boy, I don't know. My sisters are extremely giving. They are on the boards of so many
nonprofits.
Yes, very much.
Have they always been like that?
Well, we kind of got involved when my sister Lori had an accident. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of all got involved with the Lost and Foundation. And then I think as they got older, I think they just kind of got more and more involved. Mm-hmm. My oldest daughter works at the American Legion, so she works with vets. And so she does a lot of
caregiving.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. She's always been compassionate, but did you see a difference? I mean, in the last few years as she's watched you be resilient?
I would like to say yes, but I think it's just a matter of as she got older. I don't think that it's necessarily me. Sadly, the only thing that I think the cancer did for them is give them anxiety.
Oh, I would disagree. And I can only say that because I really only know your older daughter.
Right.
And my experience with her in the last 10 years has been a shift in terms of her choosing to live a life that she wants rather than a life that society might have expected of her.
Right.
And I think that comes directly from you and her experience with you, and recognizing that life is unpredictable and we need to make the most of it from day one, from tomorrow morning when we wake up. Mm-hmm. And that's what I see in her. Do you have any stories about that in particular? Have they said anything to you, or did you have that discussion ever?
No, not in specific Not really, words. No. My daughters definitely know their worth. Mm-hmm. But they watch their single mom provide them with everything. So, and then I got sick and still did my hardest to provide them with everything. Mm-hmm. But yes, they definitely know their worth. They definitely know that this is their life, nobody else's. I don't know. They're just amazing girls. They are. They really are. My whole face lights up. And I'm just, you talk about true love. Those two are my true love. Yeah.
For our listeners, when Andy was talking about the Lost and Foundation, that's an organization here in Helena, Montana, and they do fundraising efforts for people with exorbitant, unrelatable medical bills. things that when you look at it, you can't even imagine how many zeros are added at the end. And they do these special events where generally they have a lot of musicians involved, different bands, and multiple stages. And they do a huge silent auction. And that's how Andy and I met, was our band played at the fundraiser for her and her medical bills almost 10 years ago. And I remember I had been part of Lawson Foundation for another one of their events. But for some reason, this one, I had to connect directly with Andy during the event. So our band had played. I came back out. She thanked me. And then she came around the table and we talked just for a few minutes. So just so our listeners know, that's what the Lawson Foundation is about. And it's a great local organization. So I'll put a link in the blog post associated with this podcast so that if you decide you're driven to contribute, that you can do that easily.
Right. Yes. And they do throughout the year, they do, where they donate money to people who have to drive out of town for medical costs, or they will help with rent, or, it's not just
medical bills specifically.
Well, and it's not just the big fundraisers that they do. They also have money that's donated that they set aside for special cases.
I had forgotten that they collect all year round.
They do.
And as a matter of fact, I don't know if you know about this or if our listeners know, but on Amazon, if you go in via smile.amazon.com, you can select a nonprofit so that a small percentage of every purchase you do on Amazon goes to that nonprofit. So I have Lawson Foundation designated for mine right now.
I did not know that. I will have to share that with the family.
Yes. I don't always like ordering from Amazon because I like to go to our local merchants, but sometimes we're in Helena, Montana. Some things are hard to find around here.
Like local merchants.
Like local merchants, right? The ones that haven't shut down. So back to stories, because I just want to finish up with one more story. And I'm going to share my experience of resilience, and I'm hoping it will trigger a story of yours, a very specific incident.
Okay.
When our boys were very little, my husband was suddenly dropped to half salary. He was working for a nonprofit. The organization wanted to just cut it completely, so he would have just completely lost his job. But the executive director for this nonprofit, that was the original nonprofit, not the head nonprofit, which was the umbrella organization that wanted to shut it down. The executive director of my husband's nonprofit negotiated his 2 employees to get half salary for 4 months, and he completely gave up his salary for those 4 months just so that his employees wouldn't be totally messed up, because we both had families, and the executive director, his son was mostly grown. So for 4 months, we were on half salary, and we were notified on November 6th that the next paycheck was going to be half, and we hadn't paid our mortgage yet. And Montana has notoriously low salaries to begin with, so this was really a big deal. And I remember at first thinking, I've lived on less. I mean, when I was a student in college, I would dig through the cushions of my car to get a quarter to get ramen. I would go a whole day without eating if I knew that I was going to work at a restaurant that night and they'd feed me. So I've lived on less. But the kicker for me was 2 months into it, I had made all the calls to put off certain payments. Our mortgage company was very flexible to be able to add a payment at the end and skip a payment in the middle of this time. Our car payment, the same thing. Our banks worked with us. So I felt like I could breathe a little bit. But I remember it was about 2 months in, and I went to the grocery store. I had left the boys with our neighbor's daughter. And I was trying to decide between buying milk and buying eggs. And I remember standing there looking at the cooler with the milk and then across the aisle to the cooler with the eggs. And tears just started to dribble down my face because it wasn't just me. This was the health and well-being of our children.
Right.
And it never occurred to me to ask for help.
I can relate to that one.
Yeah. And now I wouldn't hesitate if I was in that situation, I would not hesitate to ask my brother or my sister or my mom or an aunt or uncle, even a good friend, can I borrow $20 this week? I'm just in a bad place right now. I wouldn't hesitate now. But back then, there's no way I would have asked for help. And I didn't think about it. That's the worst part. It's not so much that I didn't want help. I would have taken it. But it didn't even occur to me to ask. And these tears just start dribbling down my face. I'm at Vans. And I picked up milk because I knew at least we could have cereal.
Right.
And if it was eggs, that's all it would be eggs. Milk could go into other things. So I bought the milk and I got home and I remember sitting with the boys. We had cereal for dinner that night because I just was in such a bad place that I just couldn't even think about cooking anything. And I remember the boys sitting at the table just laughing. Cereal for dinner? They were little and they were so excited to have cereal for dinner.
Right.
And I remember that moment of being okay. That sudden realization that this is not a big deal and we would get through it. And that I had these two healthy boys that thought cereal for dinner was an awesome idea.
Right.
Because they weren't entitled. They didn't have expectations of what kinds of food we would have. They just ate what was in front of them. And they thought this was a novel idea to have cereal for dinner. But that is such a vivid memory for me. It takes me back as if I'm still there sitting at the table listening to my boys giggle about eating cereal.
I love that.
It was definitely a moment where I realized we were going to be okay. I felt strong.
Yeah.
After that moment of weakness.
I would never, still to this day, I will never ask for help. I don't know why. It's so hard. It's so hard for me to ask for help.
I think it's hard for most people to ask for help.
I don't know about any specific story that I have that...
Tell me about something somebody did for you that caught you off guard and surprised you. When they helped without being asked.
Boy, I don't...
I remember seeing something on Facebook. Maybe a year ago? 2 years ago? You posted something about somebody sending you a gift card or something in the mail. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
That's what popped into my head.
Yes, I got a gift card from a random, what did they call it? I can't even remember, but it was almost like Fairy Godmother, but it wasn't. And there was like $100 and some odd dollars. And I know who it was. And it's not the first time that this family has sent me money. So yes, I guess there's the, I don't ask, but I have this one family that is now, I consider family. That they don't have the extra to be sent in to me, but they do on occasion. And I love it. Obviously you want to send it back, but you're like, the fact that somebody loves you enough to randomly send you.
And anonymously.
And anonymously. And yeah, and I can try to call them out on it anytime I want, and they'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's the best. So you can just do it. You can just take it and use it and know that somebody values you.
Yes.
And what you are creating in the world through your energy and fortitude.
Yes. I guess that's a nice way to look at it.
I love that. Yeah. What a great story.
Just to be given a little back, I guess, is because I would give anybody
what you have.
Everything I have, if that's what they needed. Yeah.
Which is part of why people do that back for you, I'm sure.
Maybe. It's still very hard to ask for help.
It's better when people don't ask and then they just show up.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That is very true.
So there's a Jewish tradition, a mitzvah, which is a good deed, but actually in Hebrew, the word mitzvah actually means commandment. So the Jewish tradition is that it's a commandment to do a good deed. It's not something you have a choice about. You do it because you are commanded to do good deeds. Well, what's interesting is that there are different levels of these mitzvot. And the first is to give, where you both know who's giving, who's receiving.
Right.
The second is to give and not let them know who gave it to them.
Okay.
So the receiver doesn't know, the giver knows. But the highest form of charity in the Jewish tradition is to give and not know who's receiving it, and for the receiver not to know who's giving it.
Oh,
That's the highest form of charity.
I like that.
Isn't that cool?
I do like that.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
I have this friend that left a beautiful little ornament in my mailbox one day.
A handmade
A
ornament.
handmade ornament. That is
What did it
hanging
say
in
on
my
it?
room. What does it say? Inspire?
That's what it says.
Yes.
Well, that's one of the many things that I would love to be able to do more of for you.
Oh, honey,
As a very small token.
you are so wonderful.
You're wonderful. So, just to close this out, if anyone is interested in learning more about what's going on over here with Andy, I can put a little blog post together that tells a little bit more about her story, about the diagnosis, where she is, and what she's doing now. But mostly what I'd love for our listeners to take away from this conversation is the idea that resilience isn't just survival. Resilience is about surviving through something, but also thriving and giving back.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com.
Now listen to me, honey, while I say, how could you tell me that you're going away? Don't say